Window World is proud to present Kevin Kietzman Has Issues. Simply the best for less at windowskansascity.com.
Lots of interesting takeaways from the college football weekend we had. Kansas State was beat by Texas at home in a game that Chris Klieman decided to go with Adrian Martinez at quarterback instead of last week's Big 12 Offensive Player of the Week, Will Howard. There were a lot of issues as K-State was outcoached, outplayed, and may have just played their way out of a Big 12 championship game appearance. More on that. KU snaps their losing streak and has a big-time win at home against Oklahoma State. Fans in Lawrence rip down the goalpost as KU is bowl eligible for the first time since 2008. More of the same from Mizzou as they lose another close one at home. This time to Kentucky. Missouri's chances of going bowling this year are incredibly slim with their remaining schedule. I'm Spencer Kietzman with the weekend edition of Kevin Kietzman Has Issues. All that and more brought to you by Cornerstone Property Management and owner G.W. Weld. They can offer you a property ownership service that is great. If you own a property, what they do is great. GW owned 10 properties at one point while still working a full-time job. He couldn't find someone to manage his properties and tenants the right way, so he decided to just go into business himself, start his own business, so he can manage his and his clients' properties the right way. Think of Cornerstone as the middleman between you, your property, and your investment. The best thing about it, not one client has ever left Cornerstone for another property manager. That has not happened. Cornerstone manages hundreds of properties with hands-on care in finding excellent tenants, maintaining the property, and collecting rent. If you own rental properties or recently inherited them and you don't know what to do, go to homewithcornerstone.com and request a free quote. Cornerstone Property Management online at homewithcornerstone.com. Let your rental work for you. Also brought to you by Earth Effects Outdoor Living. It's time for you to jump on board with Earth Effects Outdoor Living so you can have the outdoor lifestyle at your home that you've always wanted. Go to his website, eeoutdoor.com. You will find many, many beautiful projects that they have done for businesses and homeowners across the Kansas City area. Absolutely beautiful stuff at eeoutdoor.com. They are a full-service landscape company specializing in hardscapes for those quality-of-life projects such as fire pits, outdoor kitchens and bars, patios, water features, all the above. They also specialize in outdoor lighting so they can really illuminate your home and all the beautiful aspects of your home that you want to show off to your neighbors and friends. Daniel has over 25 years of experience in the industry. I remember talking to him before the football season started, and I was just getting to know him at the time. Obviously, fresh advertiser here on Kevin Kietzman Has Issues in the last few months, and he told me that basically once he got on a lawnmower after he was out of high school, it was pretty much over from there. I mean, he knew what he was doing, he knew what he wanted to do, and that was eventually to go into business for himself. And he's done an incredible job. There's a lot of beautiful projects to check out at eeoutdoorliving.com. Give him a call, 816-478-7700. That's 816-478-7700. They're also on Facebook, and they can give you the outdoor lifestyle you've always dreamed of. All right, there's lots to get into. Let's go.
Roberts Robinson Chevrolet Buick GMC presents Kevin Kietzman Has Issues. Shop, click, drive at robertsrobinson.com.
All right, so we'll start it off with sort of a fun story. As many of you listeners know that I am in the car business. I sell Chevrolets at Van Chevrolet here in Phoenix. A lot of you may recognize that name. There is a Van Chevrolet, I believe, still in Kansas City, owned by Larry Van Tile, who has a lot of the Plaza properties still, I believe. Anyways, very successful dealership guy. He's owned many, 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 many car dealerships across the country, and, it wasn't that long ago when he pretty much sold most of them, retired from the business, and he's just sitting on a pile of money, enjoying life, as he should. But regardless, I've had a customer, and I met a lot of you old-time Royals fans might remember this name from the late 80s and early 90s. Bill Pacoda, who was a utility guy. He's got a lot of interesting accolades throughout his baseball career. Mainly, just a utility guy. I think he spent 5 or 6 seasons with the Kansas City Royals before he was traded, I believe, to the New York Mets, and then went on and played a season for the Braves maybe. Anyways, incredible guy, and I've really enjoyed the last 6 months or so. I ordered him a Corvette, so I sold him a brand new 2023 Corvette C8 Stingray convertible, just an absolutely beautiful car that he loves. I mean, the guy sends me picture texts of out here in Phoenix. There's a place called Bartlett Lake, which is north of Scottsdale, and he goes to Roosevelt Lake as well. I think the most recent one was Roosevelt Lake, and there's like a parking lot area near some campgrounds with just a beautiful mountain view with the lake right there. And he likes getting up early in the morning, driving his Corvette up there just to open it up on a wide open road where there's absolutely no traffic. And he sends me pictures of his Corvette with the sunrise coming up. And anybody who's in sales of any kind appreciates customers that do stuff like that. It really does make me feel good that he's happy with his car that he waited 4 months to get while the order was being built. So what he does is he goes up there, he takes a bunch of pictures, just kind of takes in the view and the sunrise, and then he goes to TPC and plays golf right after that. So he's living the good life. He loves his car, and I absolutely just love that he loves his car. But anyways, I just wanted to throw that name out there just sort of as a big-time flashback. He's in his early 60s now. He had a very, very, very successful career in the energy business after baseball. And I talk to him quite often, at least once a week. He really loves his car. We don't talk about baseball, though. That's just one thing that it's kind of interesting. He still watches. He tells me he still watches. He watched the World Series and stuff like that, which the Houston Astros shut down last night and beat the Phillies. But I talked to him, and it got me thinking that a lot of athletes that retire from the game, they either stick with the game or they go in the complete opposite direction. And he told me there's about a 1-year window from when you retire from baseball to where you pretty much have to make a decision whether you're going to stay involved in the game somehow, whether it's the media, whether it's coaching, whether it's working in the front office somewhere. And we see a lot of players that just sort of fall out of the public eye and fall off the public map once they retire, and he was one of them. He had a lot of other interests. There was a family business that he got involved with I believe him and his brother and his parents as well, and just a very, very, very successful guy once his baseball career ended. And he told me that he remembers my dad, too, from being in the clubhouse in the early 90s when my dad was with Channel 4 in Kansas City. And that was back when he told me the dynamic. The only thing baseball I've really talked to him about was this, with his experience with the Royals. And that was the relationship with the local media in the clubhouse was a lot more like buddy-buddy type back in the early 90s. And I think a lot of players that played in that era would agree with that. With social media nowadays, you really can't. I mean, there were times when players back then, after the games, were kicking back beers with the media in the locker room. I mean, some major league clubhouses even had a little mini keg set up for players and media to enjoy a beer on a Friday night after a game or something like that. So he said that was all going on. It's just different now. You don't see anything like that in these clubhouses. Social media has changed it. The players are way more, I guess, controlled, reserved in what they say and who they hang out with. But then again, back in like the 60s, 70s, and 80s, a lot of the players wanted to be buddies with the sports writers, so they would write good things about them. And now they just don't care as much. But just wanted to throw that name out there for you guys to see if you remember that. He's got some interesting accolades. He's one of, I guess maybe, I think I looked this up a couple months ago. He's one of very, very few. I think it's maybe 23 players in the modern era of baseball who have played in a major league game all 9 positions on the field. Bill Pecota has done that. He's also the only guy, and this is the weirdest, wildest stat ever. Opening day in Yankee Stadium in 89 or 1990, he was not a home run hitter at all. He hit all 3 of his home runs in Yankee Stadium on opening day in whichever year that was, and he's the only player to do that, to have all 3 of the only 3 home runs he hit in one season come at Yankee Stadium. I mean, that is just that's hard to do. And, you bring that up to him, I'm sure he'd have a pretty good laugh about that as well. But just wanted to throw that name out there for you guys before moving on to college football, where the Kansas Jayhawks had their most well-rounded football game of the season yesterday, and it wasn't even close. I mean, Kansas was hitting all cylinders on offense. They got up early. The defense was making stops. I know Oklahoma State had a backup quarterback in there, but Kansas State kind of let the air out of Oklahoma State last week, I felt like. And I mentioned this on the podcast last week. I feel like Oklahoma State under Mike Gundy has a lot of quit in them for whatever reason. They get off to a good start, they lose a tough game, and they just don't ever really seem to bounce back from that, and they kind of, stay stagnant at that 8-win mark. That's just kind of what Oklahoma State has done. Have they had some 11-1 seasons under Gundy? Of course they have. They've been good, and they've had a lot of success, but for whatever reason, Oklahoma State just seems to sort of shut it down after a couple of tough losses, and that's kind of what we saw yesterday in Lawrence. While Kansas played great, Devin Neal had 225 yards rushing for the Jayhawks. He was absolutely outstanding, and Kansas is bowl eligible. I'm happy for my KU friends in that regard. With all the basketball stuff that's gone on, all the scrutiny that Bill Self is under in that Kansas basketball program coming off a national championship, I think Jayhawks fans needed this yesterday on the football field. They ripped down the goalpost in Lawrence. They took it to the pond on campus. I can't remember what it's called. I've seen it. But they've done it before. I remember in 2004, I was at the game where Kansas beat Kansas State for the first time since maybe 1992 or something like that. 93 maybe, I'm not sure. It had been a while. It had been 10 or 11 years, and that's what they did then. They ripped down the goalpost and they took it to this pond. Maybe we're starting to see the goalpost rip down come back in college football this year. That has been frowned upon for at least a good decade, I think, where schools have been okay with fans, rushing the field to celebrate with the team after the games. We've seen that a couple of times in Lawrence this year, and even K-State, after beating Oklahoma State last week, they let the fans come onto the field. But we've seen schools really, frown upon the goalpost teardown, which has been a long-time tradition in college football, and a lot of it's safety related. There's been stories of fans getting hurt climbing up on those things, and you're carrying a goalpost. It's not safe. We saw Tennessee do it this year when they beat Alabama. They rushed the field, ripped that thing down. Maybe that's coming back, and I think it's kind of cool. I'm a huge fan. Get on top of that thing. Rip it down. I remember K-State back in the day was ripping down goalposts after they would beat Nebraska a couple of times, and for whatever reason, the goalpost in Manhattan would never go down. It would take them about an hour to rip that thing down, and that must have been, nailed in there and screwed in there tight, because I remember in 98, they had a bunch of people hanging on it. I was just a little kid, and we stayed and watched until that thing actually went down. It took them forever to get that thing down and then eventually taken to Aggieville. But congrats to the Jayhawks. That's a huge time accomplishment for Coach Lance and that program to be bowl eligible for the first time since 2008. That was the year I graduated high school. And then my freshman year at K-State was the last time Kansas went to the bowl game. I believe they played Minnesota, and at one point was called like the Buffalo Wild Wings Bowl or the Insight.com Bowl here in Tempe at Sun Devil Stadium. I think that was the last bowl game that the Jayhawks went to when they beat Minnesota with I think it was Todd Reesing and those guys that were still there for KU. So congratulations to them. That's a huge accomplishment. The Jayhawks are going to a bowl game. We'll see how the rest of the season plays out for KU. They had 3-game losing streak, and then boom, got a huge win. Kansas State was disappointing, to say the least. I mean, the first thing is that the quarterback, Will Howard comes off an incredible performance, Big 12 Offensive Player of the Week, absolutely outstanding 4-touchdown game against Oklahoma State. And then they decide to go back with Adrian Martinez, who at times this year has been pretty good. At times this year he's been the game manager, and at times this year he's just been the same old Adrian Martinez that was at Nebraska who couldn't beat anybody. And that's a little bit of what we saw yesterday. I give K-State credit for making a comeback in that game, making it interesting. They had the ball down the stretch with the chance to tie the game and maybe send it to overtime before the fumble. But I think that this was a typical case of athletes being athletes, and Texas has way better athletes than K-State does, especially on defense. I mean, that's what we saw. I think that Kansas State's offensive line got tired, and it kind of showed. Adrian Martinez was being pressured a lot, especially on that last drive. I mean, he was running for his life. K-State was lucky enough to convert on that 4th down play where Adrian rolled out to the right and hit Deuce Vaughn on a very, very lucky pass and catch, in my opinion, to keep that drive going. And then the fumble to end the game. K-State got lucky a couple of times. They put the ball on the turf a lot in the 4th quarter, and I think they recovered 2 of them. One of them they recovered, one of them rolled out of bounds, and the other one Texas ended up getting that sealed the deal and won the game. So just a disappointing loss for K-State at home in front of a absolutely sold-out, packed crowd in Manhattan on a cool fall night. Just typical football weather. I think everyone was excited for that one, and, Texas just came in and got the lead early, came out and dominated the first half, and it was just too much for K-State to come back from at that point. The defense played pretty good in the second half. They were able to get Texas off the field a couple of times, but at the end of the day, it just wasn't enough. And now Kansas State is going to have to get a little bit of help to make a Big 12 championship game appearance. There's a couple of teams deadlocked at 4-2 in the league that are going to sit there in second place fighting for that spot as TCU wins again. They're 9-0 now, 9-0, and they got Texas left on the schedule, so that'll be a tough one. That'll be an interesting game, but TCU is going to be there. There's absolutely no question about that. It's just a matter of who the other team's going to be, and right now Kansas State is in a heap of trouble, sitting with – they don't have a tiebreaker over Texas. I don't think Oklahoma State is too much of a threat, but they do have a tiebreaker over them. So it's going to be tough for K-State to get back to the Big 12 championship game, and they blew it yesterday. Let's just call it what it is. They blew it. They blew an opportunity to take control of the rest of the season and control their own destiny towards getting to that Big 12 championship game. And big stage, couldn't handle it, just blew it. It is what it is. The Wildcats blew it yesterday, guys. And if you're a Kansas State fan, you hate to see that. You also hate to see, if you're a Missouri fan, another close loss. I think all but the Kansas State loss for Missouri this year have been by less than 1 score. And it was more of the same in Columbia yesterday as they fall to Kentucky at home, a game where Missouri's offense wasn't that good. They sort of regressed, in my opinion, a little bit. And, if you're Missouri, that was your chance to go to a bowl game. It's pretty much over with the remaining schedule they have. So, Eli got extended, right? Which in college football, he got his contract extended. That doesn't really mean a whole lot. Schools have proved that they're willing to pay a lot of money to buy coaches out of their contracts to get them out of there. I mean, look at Nebraska. It's exactly what they did. There's teams that do it all the time. They don't care. They will spend money. They'll come up with money to buy coaches out of their contract to move forward with somebody else. So will Missouri do that? I mean, obviously not this year. So I don't know if I understand that one if I'm Mizzou, but it is what it is. So we'll see what happens a couple years down the road. Tuesday's election day. Obviously, it's a big day. Wanted to just talk real quick a little bit about what's going on here in Arizona, because I know a lot of conservatives are a huge fan of Kari Lake, who the polls I've seen here in Arizona say that she's got a very small lead over Katie Hobbs for the governor race here in Arizona. I think she's going to win. I don't see Arizona being as blue as it was 2 years ago. I think our current administration has changed a lot of people's minds on that. And she's a TV personality who, I talked to my dad about this earlier this week, and I know he's talked about this quite a bit. You're seeing elections all over the country where radio and TV guys are retired from their career and they're running for office because they've seen how the sausage is made from the inside. And I think they're sort of just fighting back with how, liberal a lot of their outlets were that they worked for and how they had to be. I think Kari Lake is a good example of that. Obviously, Katie Hobbs, every ad I see on TV here is basically trying to bus roll Kari Lake for being outspoken against Donald Trump in 2016 when he was running for president. So that's their angle. That's the liberal angle here in Arizona is, hey, this lady didn't vote for Trump, didn't vote for him, said she didn't vote for him, blah, 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 was very outspoken against him on TV. And that's their angle that they're using to run against her is you're going to, this lady changed sides all of a sudden when she got out of television, and that's who you want to be your governor? The answer is yes, that is who you want to be your governor. Katie Hobbs is a terrible candidate for the state of Arizona, and she's going to lose. There's absolutely no question about that. The Senate race here is a little more interesting. Blake Masters is kind of a little dork, in my opinion. Not the strongest Republican candidate for the Senate to run against Mark Kelly, who has the military accolades. He worked for NASA. The guy was an astronaut. I mean, so that's pretty cool. And he runs on the fact that he's a conservative liberal. He's really not. I think it's all marketing there. I think it's just pub. He's sort of a Biden puppet and hasn't really done a whole lot for the state in the first 2 years of him being a senator for Arizona. But he runs on the fact that he stands up for the police. He stands up for border control. He's a big first responder military guy, and that's how he runs. He runs sort of the blue-collar conservative angle when he's really not that. And, of course, it's politics. You see a lot of that, but I don't know if Blake Masters is going to beat him or not. It's going to be close. Right now I'm seeing polls that say that they're deadlocked. There's I saw the latest one of the latest local polls said it's 48 and 48 for each of them. There's a libertarian running as well who's got like 2% in the polls. He's not going to win, obviously. But so that's where those numbers come from. Tuesday's important, guys. Get out there. I know a lot of our listeners are voting. I mean, heck yeah, you are. I don't think anybody listening to this podcast is not concerned with some of the bigger issues that our country is facing. So get out and vote on Tuesday. Drop off those ballots. If you've already mailed them in, great. Wherever you are in Kansas or Missouri, or for me, Arizona, which apparently I'm in the Arizona 8th District. And our Republican Congress lady candidate is running unopposed. It's Debbie Lesko. So obviously, shoe in there. She doesn't have an opponent, but I looked at the maps and I'm confused. I even reached out to Twitter to some of my Arizona followers to help me out here. Every map I'm seeing online says that I should be where I live in the Arizona 6th, and it's really close because I live kind of where it cuts off. But apparently I'm in the 8th. I got my ballot and I'm literally holding it right now. It says me and my fiance live in the Arizona 8th. So there's that. But the Arizona 8th is a non-issue. I mean, the candidate's running unopposed. So there's that. I don't know. If somebody would, maybe if you want to email me to rskchevy at gmail.com, rskchevy at gmail.com. Where can I look up these actual maps? Because Kansas doesn't really do a whole lot of redistricting. Arizona does, especially in the Phoenix area because of population. I mean, there's 6 million people here in the Valley, and there's a bunch of different congressional districts throughout the metropolitan here. So I'm trying to figure out if they redistricted this year in 2022, because I'm pretty sure when I voted 2 years ago, I was in the 6th tier, and now I'm in the 8th. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but is there a good website where I can see these maps? Because I'm a huge geography nerd, and I'm just curious about this stuff. So if someone wants to help me out, great. If not, I understand. You live in Arizona, who cares? We live in Kansas and Missouri. We're worried about what's going on here, and there is plenty of going on there. So make sure you get out and vote. Make sure we vote the right way. Some things have to change in both states, in Kansas and Missouri, and I think we're aware of that as well. So that's going to do it for the weekend edition of Kevin Keatsman Has Issues. I'm Spencer. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Lots of great stuff coming up this week, so be sure to listen on your way to work to my dad on Kevin Keatsman Has Issues.